Pigeons. Those birds that so many citizens have so little sympathy for, but that give so much joy to the old ladies who feed them bread, or to the children who run after them to scare them. They are the key to understanding the sporting career of Mathieu Van der Poel's father, Adrie Van der Poel. A professional for almost 20 years, he was one of the best Dutch cyclists of the late 20th century. But his 2 positive doping tests and his investigation for the PDM case in the 1988 Tour de France are tremendous blemishes on the resume of Raymond Poulidor's son-in-law. Do you want to know his story? Without further ado, let the show begin. Adrie Van der Poel represented, back in the early 80s of the 20th century, the prototype of today's modern rider. With excellent riding skills and a stamina unbefitting of many men of his time, he was one of the few riders of his generation who combined road and cyclocross and achieved good results in both. Although his career had to be put under suspicion almost from its beginnings in 1981, when he made his professional debut with a stage in Paris-Nice and another in the Dauphiné Libéré after having finished 7th in the Moscow Olympics a year earlier. After repeating his success in Paris-Nice in 1982, the young Dutchman from Arno-Rossin got his first positive result after winning the GP of Frankfurt in 1983 for nothing less than strychnine, a rat poison that was previously used in sporting competitions in the 19th century for its stimulant effect and as a masking agent for other illicit substances such as cocaine. This strange substance was hardly used anymore in the 1980s, so Dad Van der Poel decided to tell the local authorities and the media the following excuse. He had not doped. Far from it. It was his father's fault, who, as if he were Michele Ferrari himself, doped pigeons he kept on his farm for sporting competitions. Of course, poor Adrie Van der Poel went to a family dinner, and his dad offered him pigeon cake, and that cake was contaminated by strychnine. What bad luck. Some will complain about clenbuterol, but this man's excuse served the authorities well, and all they did was strip him of his victory in that infamous Frankfurt GP. Thus, months later, Van der Poel finished 2nd in the World Cycling Championships, behind the legendary Greg LeMond, and became a star of road cycling. It didn't even take 5 months for good old Van der Poel to make his debut, as world runner-up as he deserved. At the Settimana di Sicilia in February 1984, the then quantum rider tested positive again, for the 2nd time in his career and at only 24 years of age. This time it was a stimulant, also very rudimentary, ephedrine. This substance, which is found in classic nasal decongestions to treat colds, increases energy and eliminates the feeling of hunger, promoting the cyclist in question not to be distracted and to give 100% in each and every competition. If you notice, Van der Poel was testing positive in little more than small town races, not big stage races or the monuments of cycling, which leads us to think, if he doped for events like this, what would he not do in other competitions where the prestige and the prizes were much higher? Adri is sanctioned for only 3 months without racing. It was the 80s, so it still gives him time to win a stage in the Tyrrhenian Adriatic and prepare for his best years on the road. In 1985, Van der Poel became one of the Classics Riders of the Year, winning the Paris-Bruxelles, the Classica de San Sebastian, the Flèche Brabona and the Scheldeprijs, amongst other major one-day competitions, and finishing 2nd in his first participation in the Ciclocross World Championships, one of his main objectives from then on throughout his career. In 1986, he won the first of his big monuments, the Tour of Flanders, winning the sprint, one of his main characteristics, against none other than Sean Kelly, who was not exactly lame in this discipline, and he finished 3rd in the Paris-Roubaix. With these excellent results, he got the contract of his life, signing for the PDM team, the Dutch giant that had on his payroll Pedro Delgado and Steven Rux, amongst other stars. In this team, less focused on the classics and more on the Grand Tours. In 1987 he won the Nationals of his country, and the first stage in the Tour de France, a real marathon of 260 kilometres, in which he again won the sprint, against other classics riders and sprinters. In the PDM team, Van der Poel flew much higher and faster and won many races on the calendar. But it was in 1988 that he really broke the bank. He finished second again in the World Cyclocross Championships, in an epic performance in the rain, despite the fact that in the 2 previous seasons he had not participated in any relevant competition. And after winning the Herald Sun Tour and the Star of Bessèges, he won a second cycling monument. It was in Liège-Bastogne-Liège, in an attack 50 kilometres from the finish, where he was looking to bridge to Rux. Van der Poel jumped out of the bunch and was followed by Robert Miller and the Belgian Lotto rider Michel Dernisse. Strangely, these 2 riders, slower than a Minardi ridden by Marc Jaunet, relieved Van der Poel on the front like crazy, and he took advantage to beat them very easily in the sprint, and thus he achieved yet another monument. But it was not the only thing that awaited him in that magical 88. In a very short 38 kilometre morning stage of the Tour de France, between Tarbes and Pau, the PDMs set to work to try to surprise Delgado's Reynolds team. The rockstar Tunisay, who was 5th overall, attacked on the flat, but with not too far left to go, the bunch caught him. In the peloton, there are not too many fast flatmen left, and Van der Poel takes advantage to win in the sprint, another stage for PDM, in a tour in which Rux and Tunisay smashed it, and in which the PDMers won the team classification. In 2013, an investigation showed that the team had engaged in systematic doping practices, and Van der Poel himself confessed that he doped that year with testosterone and beta-methasone, a corticosteroid that vastly improved his performance in that magic cocktail. Despite the confession, he was not stripped of the stage, and of course at the time he continued to compete. In road racing he continued as a professional until 1999, and it helped him achieve honourable positions in major classics and a victory in the 1990 Amstel Gold Race at the last minute, taking advantage of the weakness of his rivals, so in total achieving more than 100 victories as a professional. In cyclocross he achieved his dream after many years of trying, where in 1996, at the tender age of 36, he became world champion in one of the best races in history, winning the sprint in a masterful way ahead of the then Italian aliens Daniele Pontoni and Luca Bramati. He did it, and not only that, he remained on the Rabobank team's payroll until the 2000 season, where he finally decided to retire at the age of 41. As you know, he took over the career of his sons David, and in particular Mathieu, the current superstar of cycling today, and a man whose results to date, we must believe, despite being the son of a confessed doper who claimed to be contaminated by pigeons, and the grandson of one of the riders resurrected by Dr. Mabuse during the 1970s. I'm sure that at least his dad Adri is already taking care not to give him pigeon cake at dinner, just in case.